So I'm at Avant Assessment, and I'm our higher ed specialist, but I'm also our regional director for Africa, Canada, and Europe, among dozens of other things that I do. Um, but Avant Assessment, just a little bit about us. We were founded about 22 years ago at the University of Oregon. Our home office is located in Eugene, Oregon, where the university is located. We are partially still owned by the university, so our background does come from higher ed. But in the US, and it may be different other places, but I don't believe so. Universities tend not to have a lot of bureaucracy and can't always get things done in a manner that is um, the most efficient. So because of that, we formed a separate company. And our three founders actually, one of them was a professor at the university. The other two were longtime speakers of Japanese to Americans who had moved to Japan, lived in Japan for about 15, 20 years, spoke the language very well, but noticed that a lot of foreigners, especially Americans that lived there, did not survive very well. They didn't speak the language. They didn't really understand the culture. And when they came back to the United States, they wanted to find a way that they could promote more language learning and more language recognition. And one way they found was through assessment, because having that data can really push school districts and school systems to continue funding or put more funding into language learning or language support. One interesting thing about the United States, many people may not know, is we're one of 8 countries in the world that does not have an official language. It is de facto English, as you probably know, but we don't legally have an official language. So that puts us in a little different position as far as legally what we're supposed to provide for citizens of the United States. Um, uh, so most of our work started in the United States. We worked for government agencies and different lettered organizations we really can't talk about, as they say, working with them for language purposes. And we've since moved into the education field and the professional field as well. Our major test is called the STAMP. That's an acronym for Standards-Based Assessment, Standard Assessment of Measurement of Proficiency. So STAMP. We like acronyms, they're a lot easier to say than all of those words. And so our major test covers ages 6 to 12, and then we have a test that covers ages 13 and up. We do quite a bit of testing in that elementary level, we call it, ages 6 to 12. Just this month alone, we've done over 15,000 elementary tests, all in numerous languages, which I'll show you in just a second. And then our STAMP WS, our World Speak, is a writing and speaking test where we offer most of our languages, because we did do a study, and my colleague Linda was part of that study, where we looked at over 100,000 testing instances of a 4-skilled test with over 90% correlation between reading and writing and listening and speaking. So we feel quite confident that a learner's writing score will be at level or even a little bit lower than reading, and speaking will be the same with listening. And then we also have our 4-skilled test, which is reading, writing, listening, and speaking, which is completely adaptive. The reading scores determine the type of prompts for writing, as those two skills are complementary, and the listening scores dictate the prompts for speaking, as those two skills are complementary. As most of our work has been in the United States up to date, a lot of our tests do have to do with the communities we serve in the United States. As you can see, our elementary test here on the bottom left serves growing immersion communities within our country, also externally. So as you can see, an interesting one there is Yupik. We are also in the current development of a Hawaiian test for elementary. This is because we work with organizations like Galen, who support language speaking and language promotion, to help develop tests so that those learners of that language can not only have that outside validation, but those language programs have that outside validation from testing that they can then use to go to stakeholders, government officials who fund these programs, and continue to get funding to show them that there is progress and that people are learning the language. It's also great for communication with parents. We often see that sometimes parents are the ones that pull kids out of a language because they sometimes feel like we don't want them to be not American or not British or whatever they're in. We want them to make sure they're studying English, where we all know as second language acquisition people that that's not necessarily a fear they should really have. But that's really difficult to tell a parent who is also possibly a visitor in that country or speaks a language at home that for decades or hundreds of years was not allowed to be spoken in the case of Hawaiian or Yupik in Alaska. So we feel really proud to work with those languages. And these languages, the communities come to us. They come to us and they ask us to work with them. We find language specialists. We develop the test. We use their own people to train them to become raters of these languages so that they're involved in that process. The most recent one we did that with was Cabo Verdean. We have a large Cabo Verdean community in the Northeast around the Boston area. And so we worked with that community to develop a test so that their students in primary and secondary schools could get tested because they are having immersion programs in Cabo Verdean, as well as students who want to validate that language so that when they go out to get a job, they can put it on their resume that they have these skills. And it's not just something that they learned at home. It is actually something with a validated credential. So these are the types of tests that we work with in the different languages. So if you work with any communities that don't maybe have a mainstream test or don't have an external validated test, we can work with you to develop something to work with that community. A lot of the things people like with our testing is the data that you can get. You can look at group test results. So in some instances, we have them look at across an entire class, as if it's a class, could be an entire school. It could be an age group. It could be a number of different ways to look at that data, just to make sure we're visualizing where the strengths and the challenges are, where we want to put our professional learning resources and things like that. We also want to support that individual test taker. So we have the individual test report that can be given to a learner, that can be shared when they go home, that tells them in basic terms what they can do in that language. And then it gives them some suggestions for powering up, as we call it, or going to that next level. We do have testing available. Most of our testing has been created on the ACTFL scale, which is primarily used in the United States. We are moving a lot of our testing over to CEFR, which, as you know, is primarily used in Europe and other places in the world. One other feature of our system is that you're able to download the writing responses that the learners input. So you could download that for maybe you're doing discourse analysis, maybe you're looking at specific features to supplementary or heritage programs, or second language learners or learners at certain ages, certain levels. So that is something that we give you access to for your own test takers. If you're a researcher, we can work with you on possibly pulling data that you may need for research purposes from different groups so that you can see writing responses across a population of test takers. Same thing with speaking. You can download the audio. This gets a little tricky if you're accessing audio that's not your learners, because voice, according to privacy law, is something that can be identifiable. So that's just something tricky we have to worry about when we get to that, if we're looking at external researchers looking at that data. But that is one feature of our system that not only do our learners really like, because then they can go back with their instructors and review those and use that as points to show where they're really doing well and places where they can work on. It's good to work with the parents of these learners so that they can see that their students are producing. It's good to use in our own research, as well as our own, when we look at how we're going to improve what we're doing in the classroom or where we need to make those modifications to learning. We have all of this data we can go back to. One thing our test is used for quite a bit is credentialing. All of our tests are approved by the American Council on Education for credit. We are working with other governments across the world to have our tests accepted on officially accepted lists so that those tests can be used for different purposes, whether it be for visas, whether it be for college entrance, or whether it be so schools can use those tests for different reasons. So we are working on that in many other countries. But one of the programs that we're proud to sponsor, which Linda will be talking about in just a few minutes, is the Global Seal of Biliteracy. So this is a program that we feel very strongly helps expand the learning and teaching of languages, and not only those mainstream languages, quote unquote, that we would see like Spanish, French, and German, at least in the UK and the United States, English in many other countries, but also recognizing those less commonly tested languages. They're not always less commonly taught or less commonly spoken. To millions of Chinese people, their language is not less commonly spoken, but maybe in the United States, it's considered less commonly taught. So we don't like to say that because that kind of then puts languages against each other. We like to support as many languages as possible, and that is one reason why we like to support the Global Seal. They're a proxy for external assessments so that learners can take an assessment. Their scores are sent to the Global Seal, who then validates those scores, validates their primary language, and then presents that learner with a seal of biliteracy that can be put on their resume. It can be used on their LinkedIn profile. We have a lot of institutions in the United States who accept it for entrance into university, for credit at the university, for advanced placement. So there's a lot of reasons why we like to support the Global Seal. I won't speak too much on that because Linda will present about that in just a few minutes. Some places we're already working outside the United States, we have a partner of a university in Krakow, where the students have to prove a level of B2 to graduate. So they use our test as that proof to show that they, for English, that they can speak English. They are looking at testing in other languages they teach, Spanish, Russian, German, and French as well. We have a project currently running with British Council and the Qatar Foundation International, where we're working with institutions in the UK to expand second languages or languages other than English, as recent reports and reports even before Brexit came out that not enough languages are spoken in the UK. It's going to be detrimental if they do leave the EU, and we know it has not been, the best for them when we talk about skilled labor and things like that. So we're working with them, with these two groups, to promote the learning and teaching of Arabic in the UK. We're looking to expand that to other languages once this pilot program is kind of off the ground a little bit more. We worked with a group in Scotland called Code Division, who offers free courses to get women back in the workforce. And they specifically did a program for Ukrainian refugee women who were living in Glasgow on cruise ships and in hotels, who have these skills, but maybe needed some of those soft skills to go into the workforce in Scotland. So we worked with them to provide that testing so they could get a Global Seal to then get a job. And then we also are working with a program called Amala Education. They're based in London, but they work primarily in Africa and the Middle East. They work with those learners who have had some kind of break in their high school learning because of war or because of other reasons they've had to flee their country. And so we work with them to provide testing so that those students can get a validated credential so they can then go further on in their careers, and either whether it be academic, whether it be professional. Another part of what we do is professional learning. So we work with world language programs, dual language immersion programs, heritage and supplementary programs, as well as bilingual education programs to do teacher trainings. We work with those who use our testing to analyze that data and how they can best use that data, best present that data. We do professional coaching with educators, as well as leadership development. A new team that we've put together is our medley team, which is more effective dual language immersion. And so Dawn Samples, who is head of our professional learning, is over that team. We also have Greg Roberts and Brandy Mao, who both come from Utah. Utah is a state in the United States, which you've probably heard of, but what they're well known for in languages is they are the first state to really go all in with language immersion. It came at the governor level. So they have funding from the top of the state. And so they have dual language immersion in 8 languages all over the state that goes from primary all the way up into higher ed. And so we look at them as a model of how we'd like to do in other states. But given the way that funding works in the US, we don't have a national education system. Everything is state or local funded. it makes it a little bit complicated. So we do quite a bit in that area of professional learning and immersion. And so, one of the ways that we've talked about working with Bilingualism Matters is working with groups who you may be working with to have them test, you take that data, help them turn that into not only research, but also actionable research or information for their parents or their stakeholders. And we can help do that as we do that in the United States. So we're here to help. Please don't hesitate to reach out to me. And I don't want to go too long because I know I want to have Linda to have her time. So I will stop sharing.
Well, thank you, Nick. Thank you for the intro. So share my screen here. And here we go. Can everyone see this? Yes? Great. So my information is here. It certainly is available with Kat. She's going to share that on the program information. It's also on the last slide, but I'll skip over it. Otherwise, theglobalseal.com is our website, and that's an easy way to contact me as well. So I don't take too much time for that. What I want to really share with you is the impact of language certification on language learners and on language programs. And this was a great phrase that a student shared after receiving a Global Seal of Biliteracy, a student from the University of Oregon. He said, finally a test that means something. And this is exactly what we're seeing in the data and in the research. We published a number of student comments made in the research that we published in the Foreign Language Annals about Seal of Biliteracy certification. Another high school student said, and the quote is here, "It gives you a reason to finish. Before I was like, why am I in this class?" And oftentimes students see a language course as just a course among many other courses, and oftentimes they don't necessarily connect that course or that learning with their future or with something valued beyond just a transcript or a report card or a mark in a course. And so when you can provide an external certification that documents something learned in the classroom, whether it's a technology skill with a Google certified or anything else, it has incredible value to the learner, and that impacts intrinsic motivation and a number of other things that we see with the student. So we find that in lots of the research that we've done, both with data in terms of the impact, but also just in just student focus groups, that they want certificates. And they want them for a number of reasons. First of all, we found that in over almost 80% of the time, students, even in as young as high school or middle school, those late primary grades, they connect a certificate with work. They even skip over their next steps, potentially at the university level, and look directly to what are they going to do with this in the future. And so a certificate is something they connect with their future career opportunities. We also see that when you can stack certificates and provide benchmark awards, that there is not only increase in student motivation, but there's also an increase in learner autonomy. Students become aware of their pathway, and they take an active role in changing those outcomes, that power up that Nick referred to a little bit earlier. We know that certificate offerings from the data, a number of universities have done this, as well as at the secondary level, that increases program retention. In fact, in the Foreign Language Annals study that's listed here, we found that it doubled the upper level retention levels of students. So it's a huge piece, and it's something that really does make a positive impact on your program. We're also seeing this now in our supplemental programs, our community-based heritage language programs that may take place on the weekends, where a student, when they get to that end of the sort of primary years, they want to drop out of those programs. And I'm thinking of the Gallic program we just learned about, where students really want that carrot that's going to drive the attendance and the excitement and engagement, and continuing to sort of level up their language skills. And so we see that happening in our research as well. And lastly, for those people that are in university, students that are exiting secondary programs and are going into the workspace, documented language skills actually can mean pay differentials. And some of those are actually quite significant. And so just as an overview of what is the Global Seal of Biliteracy, it is a language certificate. It is a certificate that measures language skills through testing, and it is biliteracy. So it isn't just being bilingual, it's also literacy in terms of the reading and writing of the language that we are certifying. And what's really important about that piece is that oftentimes, if there is a home language, it might be sustained at sort of the table talk conversational level, but not always at the literacy level or the workplace and academic space. And so we really want to encourage not just the sustaining of a home or a heritage language or the adoption of a new language, but we really want to grow those beyond that survival level of I can just get by. The program is available to anyone of any age with documented language skills. So that students that we see at the end, sort of the end of the primary programs, secondary, university, and working adults. And this program is completely free. The cost of testing isn't included. We have a variety of tests that qualify, but the certificate process is completely free. And the certificate is stackable. So we want to encourage students to take, again, control and excitement over their own language journey and allow them to level up to earn multiple certificates. And our tests that we have qualifying cover over 130 languages and are available on both the ACTFL scale, which is, as Nick mentioned, is common here in the United States, but also on the CEFR scale. And so we have these three levels: functional fluency, which is basically at the B1 level, working fluency at B2, and professional fluency at C1. And you can see what we've created is then a universal, consistent certificate that becomes a proxy, so that the university or the employer doesn't necessarily have to be familiar with the test that you took or the score and how it's scored, but that they can trust that the test has been vetted by our board of advisors and has met criteria for being an actual proficiency test. So a test of how the language is actually used by that language candidate, as opposed to just a fill in the blank or memorized list of vocabularies. And you'll see here from our map that we've been issued in lots of different countries. The dark green are where we have actually issued awards. They've actually have candidate holders there of the Global Seal of Biliteracy. And the lighter green is where we have testing and applications in process. So we maybe don't have all of the test scores back yet and are awaiting those results. So it's exciting to see the growth and the excitement by programs when they and the impact on their language learners. We've also, again, keeping that pathway in mind, it created pathway awards so that for students before they reach that certification level, we have recognition in the form of ribbons. We have a free downloadable little passport where students can track their growth as they take a test on language and see where they are in that certificate pathway. We really believe that it creates excitement when you begin with the end in mind, as we quote from Stephen Covey, to think about how do we articulate long-term and promote and support long-term language learning. So again, they're not just getting by, they're actually getting to a level where they can be certified. And the certificate identifies their level. It identifies which scale was used for on that test, as well as the test level or the proficiency level for that scale. It'll identify both a first language, which we identify as their dominant language, the language in which they are most comfortable speaking, listening, reading, and writing, as well as that second learned language. And here's what's exciting is it also provides an opportunity for the school or the organization that is testing the students and certifying them with their own name. So their name actually does appear on the certificate, the name of your program, your state in the US or your country, and a very unique serial number, which is important and allows the student to then share their digital certificate, but also to leverage it for some great workplace or academic opportunities. One of the things that I had the opportunity to do this past weekend was attend a program for a Czech supplemental school, a heritage community-based program here in the Chicago area that recognized 17 different students for their Czech language schools, language skills. And one of the things that the program director said was, our program is an enrichment program. We've never tested our students. We don't give grades. We don't assign any kind of percentage to any of their work. And she said, we never knew how well they were really doing. She said, by providing that external test and a certification, our parents know that our program is working. And the students are excited because they now see the value in that sort of every Saturday participation. And so this is what that serial number can do. It allows the recipient to add it to a resume, to a CV. They can, for example, use it on their LinkedIn profile. The serial number goes right underneath licenses and certifications. And so this is a great way to give external validation, but also importantly enough, it validates language skills, because typically on LinkedIn, language skills are just self-identified. And so what one person says I'm really good at may or may not be true. In fact, a recent study that was done by Babbel and LinkedIn UK found that language skills was the #1 thing people lied about or exaggerated on their LinkedIn profiles. We also created a language profile where the student can actually share their certificate digitally with a university, with an academic program, and it provides for an employer, for example, a description of what that certificate level means and what that person is able to do in the workplace. And so again, our goal is not just to provide a document that certifies a level of language, but provide a way for a student that receives that certificate to leverage it and share it so that it actually has personal and meaningful value to them. They can include their language journey and describe about maybe their language experiences, list their coursework, talk about how they've used the language in the real world, or how meaningful it is for them to maintain their heritage and their cultural identity. We see a lot of educators that are choosing to become Global Seal certified. They then can sort of lead by example to their own students. We see this with pre-service teachers as well as experienced teachers, adding, that they have then validated their own language skills. Oftentimes, if we've been in the classroom for a very long time, working with younger level learners, our language skills may, if it's a second language, may actually, dissipate. Maybe we need to, think about where our own skills are. Oftentimes as a teacher, maybe we're just writing, very good at the top of a paper and not really doing extended, organized academic language of our own. And so the process is very simple. There we have a free online application where we take basic information about the school and the contact person. We provide by automatic response the next step directions. You can apply before or after testing. We provide those directions on how to submit test scores for qualifying candidates. We have a test finder on our website, so you can find a test. We have a test for Gallic, for example. And then we provide free of charge the personalized certificates with the embossed seals, and we send those to the school or to the organization as well. So Just in closing, there are, with the Global Seal of Biliteracy, additional opportunities for research. So we have 3 different certificate levels in different languages. So there might be comparisons there. For example, what percentage of secondary schools test at what level? And maybe we find out more about why they, what was the program that, was effective, what was working. You can compare languages. Again, we've certified in dozens of different languages. And so that's another kind of aspect or opportunity for research. The impact on a program, I mentioned that we're seeing programs and retention go up or double or become potentially more effective through the feedback they receive from testing, especially, for example, in the Czech school where they had never tested before. You might want to compare grade levels or student programs. How do our secondary program students do compared to university students, or even very highly motivated working adults? And we also offer some incredible opportunities for our Global Seal teachers to connect with each other globally and provide opportunities for those students through our teacher pair share tech communicate with each other. So right now we have over 100 teachers and their classrooms connecting with each other around the world to improve their speaking and have an opportunity to give them that platform. As we heard with Galen, is, they need real world opportunities and real world audiences to use their language skills. So with that, I'll just close and pass it back to Kat. I don't know if we have some questions or for Nick or for myself. We're happy to hear and answer those.